Was there any image this week more powerful than this? The broadcaster Samira Ahmed heading into an employment tribunal, flanked by other women in her industry, of all races and backgrounds, united. She, a woman of colour, is taking the BBC to court for paying her 600% less than a white male presenter who anchored a similar show. 600%! These high-profile cases are just the tip of the iceberg. This year, the gender pay gap actually widened for the first time in 6 years, with full-time workers being paid 8.9% more if they're men. The figures are bad enough, but that women have to fight so hard for something that is simple equality beggars belief. Anyone who cares about fairness needs to get on our side.
I care about fairness and I care very much about women in the workplace, and I think it is a fantastic time to be a woman in the workplace. We've had women in top roles, from prime ministers, head of the London Fire Brigade, head of the London Met. You know, you name it, women can now get to the top, and I really do celebrate that. So we share something there. When it comes to the gender pay gap, I feel that the gender pay gap, you just referenced the difference between a man's full-time earnings and a woman's full-time earnings. I feel it is such a blunt instrument that doesn't actually tell us very much, because if you go into a room and you say, men over there, women over there, earnings, there's a difference. That really doesn't take into account most of the things, which is the detail and the data that we should be paying attention to, which is more relevant. Because first of all, it's illegal to pay people differently for the exact same role. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, women sometimes do make different choices. So there's very little pay gap between going into the world of work until the age of about 40. Then it starts to widen when you look at things like ladies, and it often is ladies, take the time off work to have a family and to raise a family or to care for elderly relatives, etc. So there are details that are going into that don't make the system quite as unfair as those statistics present. And I always try to say that these statistics should be taken with caution, because I don't want any young girl to look at this statistic and think there's no point me entering the world of work because I'm going to be discriminated against from day one, because that's simply not true.
Afua, may I?
Yes. Can I just give you some statistics and I'll bring you in? So just to kind of elaborate on what my point here is, the average salary for women in the UK aged between 50 and 59 is £32,052. The average salary for men the same age is £44,561. And, you know, I'll bring you in, Rachel, but just to respond to you, Michelle, I think we're saying the same things. I'm not saying that I'm interested in the superficial headline of what the pay gap is. I'm interested in the reasons that women are chronically, as the data shows, being paid less at the same level of their career as men. And the reasons are that they're doing lots of unpaid work in the home, taking care of children, taking care of elderly relatives, and it's not necessarily a choice. This labour often falls to women. It's labour that is unpaid, and it's also damaging their ability to reach their potential in the workplace, and the result is inequality. Now, exactly how you tackle that is a complicated question, but I'm hoping we can accept that that is a problem that we should address. Rachel?
Yes, I mean, I think the evidence shows that over a course of a woman's lifetime, she earns 20% less than men. And that is because your use of the word choices doesn't hide a multitude of sins. It hides a multitude of societal expectations and injustices when it comes to women's work, what is a woman's work and what is a man's work. And there is still, overall, I think, an expectation that it's going to be women who are going to give up their jobs to look after small children, older children, or elderly parents. And this is my experience, even though I think I've had every advantage in my life. Education, I've been the first woman in a lot of organisations, but I've been the one who's given up my work when I've had kids. I mean, how could I not? And by the way, just when I started off, there was one other trainee who joined at the same time as me. We both had exactly the same experience within a year. And it wasn't, I promise you, because he was so much better at writing about the economy than I was.
Name names.
His pay was put up, and I had to go to the managing editor and I'd say, why did you pay John, because his name was John, why did you bump his pay up by £3,000 a year and not mine? And they went, well, because, you know, John might get married and have a family. I said, I might get married now. Anyway, there we go.
And there are loads of stories
very
like
wrong.
that. But just Trevor, before you come in as well, you know, there's these big structural problems. But I also raise the case of Samira Ahmed. It's not that she's been taking time off her job to raise her kids. She's doing the same work as Jeremy Vine did. It's a very comparable show, not the same show, but comparable. She was earning 600% less. That is just naked unfairness.
Well, I think we've got to be careful. We're talking about several different things here. And by the way, speaking as the person who launched legal action when I was at the AHRC against a very large council on equal pay, because they were paying dinner ladies different to the guys who were on, out in the garden.
I've just written a children's book about
and we
that
won.
Case, by the way.
They don't let me back in the city because they had to sell their conference centre to pay for the settlement. That was the right thing to do. I mean, it was the right thing to do. And people shouldn't be paid differently for the same work. The pay gap thing, by the way, isn't about that. The pay gap reflects the different seniority of men and women. It's a whole different story. The issue of Samira Ahmed, which I want to raise, to be honest, I'm a great fan of Samira, as I regard her as a friend, but in the same way as the Miriam O'Reilly case some years ago, I think we just need to step back a bit, and we five need to step back. Television presenting is not a job.
Hear, hear.
It is not a job.
Hear, hear.
You know, being a dinner lady is a job. You go through interviews, you have to have qualifications and so on. Being a gardener is all of that. Television presenting doesn't have what people call job-like characteristics. And why I'm worried about this focus on this issue is that actually, if you start polluting the law by essentially making judgments on this kind of thing, then you weaken the case of ordinary people who have to go into court and make arguments about the content of their job, which is nothing like being in television presenting.
Complete nonsense, Trevor, and how insulting to people who do
Every time I
like
say something,
no,
it's insulting.
Really
Why don't you deal with what I've actually said?
First of all, you've set up a false dichotomy between ordinary people and women like Samira, who get up, have to pay for childcare, do their work, and hold people to account. If you watch Newswatch, he said it's not a job, as if it's not labour that deserves to be rewarded in the marketplace.
It's not a job like
I'm a television presenter.
That's just an absurd and unhelpful thing to say. Men get rewarded 6 times more for doing that job as a woman. Why is it undermining the idea that it's a job that deserves to be paid?
Before I tell you what I think...
It's not a job like an ordinary job.
Let's just see what the BBC themselves are saying about the Samira Ahmed case. BBC News says, points of view is an entertainment programme with a long history and is a household name with the public. Newswatch, while an important programme, isn't. Samira was paid the same as her male predecessor when she began presenting Newswatch. Gender has not been a factor in levels of pay for points of view. News and entertainment are very different markets, and pay across the media industry reflects this, says BBC News. You've got 2 lines running here, Afua. One which I absolutely agree is it's terrible when you show those statistics, how a woman through her life or different age bands of her life. That's absolutely wrong. But I honestly think, to support Trevor's point, to use Samira, much as I like her, and indeed I've worked with her actually, Samira, there's a simple fact which the BBC has put forward. Recognition of Jeremy Vine is at 79% with the general public. Recognition of Samira Ahmed is at 29% of the general public. I don't expect to get the same show fee on LBC, where I have 1.5 million listeners, by the way. I don't get the same fee as Graham Norton gets on the BBC with the millions. And that is the simple matter. Trevor's right. You could have been a hairdresser and you're a TV presenter. You could have been a politician. You could have been a jockey. You could have been anything you like and you're a presenter. So it's not the same. It's not the same in the level of training. And you will command a fee. You will command a fee by the size of your audience, which is why Mr. Norton earns, quite rightly, a lot more than I do per show.
If you look at the recent issue where the BBC had to overturn a judgment it made about Naga Munchetty, where she was reprimanded for condemning racism, if it hadn't been for Samira Ahmed holding the head of editorial standards to account on her programme, that might not have happened. The work that she does, and this isn't about her personally, this is about, to paraphrase Michelle earlier, little girls watching this programme and seeing you, Trevor, say that if you aspire to hold important and powerful people to account on TV, that's not a job and you don't deserve to be paid equally. And I don't think that's a totally different category to the work that dinner ladies or road sweepers or council workers or factory workers, all of which are jobs I respect and deserve to be paid equally.
That isn't what I said.
I think you're just being unnecessarily divisive and patronising.